Species. Unite.
I mean, it's an addiction, an obsession, a sickness that these people seem to have that, they don't think that it could happen to them. And even when it does, they are still in denial about it.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Novogratz. This is Species Unite. We have a favor to ask. If you like today's episode and you have a spare minute, could you please rate and review Species Unite on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts? It really helps people to find the show. There's a new docuseries on HBO called Chimp Crazy. If you haven't seen it, see it. It's astonishing. It's made by Eric Goode, the guy who made Tiger King, and it is just as shocking. I think one of the reasons it's so shocking, like Tiger King, is that unless you know people own primates and wildlife and keep them in their basements, you don't really think about it. Chimp Crazy focuses on individual chimpanzee owners, private owners that adopt cute baby chimps who then turn into large wild animals. And it usually ends pretty badly. This conversation is with Brittany Peet. She's PETA's general counsel for captive animal law enforcement, and she makes quite a few appearances in Chimp Crazy. She's one of PETA's lawyers who has been working to free captive chimps in the United States, as well as many other captive wild animals, and get them sent to sanctuary. We're here to talk about Chimp Crazy. The whole docuseries just blew me away. And you have a very important role in it, and an even more important role in the whole bigger picture of captive wild animals in this country. So I want to get into all of that. But for people who have not seen the docuseries, will you just, it's so hard to explain the whole thing, but just tell a little bit about it so people know what we're talking about.
Well, yeah, it is a story with a lot of twists and turns. So hopefully everyone will go and watch the docuseries. But essentially, the docuseries Chimp Crazy takes viewers inside a PETA lawsuit against a chimpanzee breeding facility in Missouri that was the primary breeder of chimpanzees for the entertainment industry and pet trade for about 50 years. And once captive chimpanzees became subject to the protections of the Endangered Species Act in 2015, it allowed PETA to file lawsuits on behalf of captive chimpanzees at facilities like the Missouri Primate Foundation, which is the facility that we sued. And so in our lawsuit, we alleged that the facility and its operator were confining chimpanzees in horrific conditions, in cramped enclosures that were strewn with feces and trash and a buildup of urine that in one U.S. Department of Agriculture inspection report was described as having irritated the nasal passages of an inspector who was just in that area for a few seconds, whereas the chimpanzees are living in those areas 24/7. So we filed the lawsuit, and in an attempt to evade the lawsuit, the owner of the facility transferred ownership of the chimpanzees to an exotic animal broker named Tanya Haddix. The idea was if the owner of the chimpanzees wasn't a party to the lawsuit, well, then of course the lawsuit is moot and PETA will go away. Well, of course, PETA doesn't go away. We just added Tanya Haddix as another defendant in the lawsuit. And that's when things started to get really crazy. Long story short, PETA did eventually get an order from the court to transfer all of the chimpanzees. There were 7 remaining at the facility to an accredited sanctuary in Florida. which was great. And we showed up for the rescue, and the rescue went great. But there were only 6 chimpanzees. One of them was missing. And so that started this wild saga of trying to find this missing chimpanzee named Tonka, who had starred in a number of movies when he was younger, including George of the Jungle and Buddy with Alan Cumming. And Tanya Haddox claimed that Tonka had died. She swore up and down her husband had burned his body on a burn pit and they had the ashes to prove it. But then, of course, PETA never believed that story. And we embarked on a massive search for Tonka. We visited a number of roadside zoos trying to find him, and we ultimately issued a $10,000 reward, which was matched by Alan Cumming. And we eventually found out what happened to Tonka from the producers of the documentary. And it turned out that he was in a cage in Tanya's basement. But thankfully, we were able to get a court order to go into the basement, get Tonka out. And today he is thriving in a beautiful sanctuary in Florida.
It's such an incredible story. And it's like I was saying to you before we started recording, so lucky for the producers, for Eric Good, who is the director. Lucky is a weird word, but in the sense that all of this happened to happen in real time while they're making this documentary. And it makes it like, you just can't believe this is happening the entire time you're watching this thing. From the very beginning, even I, who talk to everybody about animals all over the globe, you kind of forget that in 2024, people still have chimpanzees or animals like that kind of wildlife in their homes. Because you don't hear about it enough, and it's not really talked about that much. And so the first few scenes from the film look like they could have been shot like in the 70s. It doesn't even feel like it's 2024 because it's so baffling that this is happening now. Will you talk a little bit about what the actual current situation is? If they're on the endangered species list, why are people allowed to own them?
Right. So arguably, under the Endangered Species Act, it's not legal to have a chimpanzee living in your private home, arguably. But that kind of gets us to one of the cruxes of this issue. Is one of the reasons that PETA has to step in these cases is because our law enforcement and regulatory authorities are not enforcing these laws that are designed to protect animals like endangered chimpanzees. So PETA has brought cases on behalf of a number of chimpanzees, including solitary chimpanzees. And so arguably keeping a chimpanzee in solitary confinement in your home violates the Endangered Species Act. But if the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't enforce that law against that person, then nothing happens. And so essentially it falls to PETA to step in to file civil lawsuits against these people. PETA has rescued 24 chimpanzees since 2012. And thankfully, the situation for chimpanzees specifically has improved dramatically, and there are fewer than 100 chimpanzees left in the United States in private homes and in roadside zoos across the country. Obviously, we're not stopping, we're not going away until that number is 0, but when you contrast it with the numbers of tigers and bears, for example, that are in these situations, which are closer to 1,000, the situation for chimpanzees is really a success story, and one that we will win within our generation. There is only one solitary chimpanzee remaining in a private home in the United States. His name is Bo, B-O-W, and he lives in Raymondville, Missouri, with a YouTube creator named Aya Katz, who has posted around 1,000 videos of herself and Bo on her monetized YouTube channel, of Bo grooming her and her otherwise engaging in direct contact with Bo. And so using the momentum of Chimp Crazy, we're trying to get the attention of authorities to finally step in and do something for Bo, because for those folks who have seen Chimp Crazy, the inevitable result of putting a chimpanzee in this situation is what happened with Travis and with Buck. He will attack a human, and he is likely to lose his life as a result.
Well, and for people who haven't seen it and might not remember, although I don't know how you can forget the Travis situation especially, but will you talk about Travis and what happened there?
Travis was a chimpanzee who was purchased as an infant from the Missouri Primate Foundation, the facility that PETA sued many years ago. And he was kept in a private home in Stamford, Connecticut by the Harold family. And he was a part of the family. He went to work with them. He was out and about in the community. It was a completely inappropriate life, but he had things to do. But then in about 2003, he was older, he was sexually mature, and that's when chimpanzees become incredibly dangerous. And of course, they're so smart. So it's very easy for them to use locks and to get in and out of doors. And he was out for a car ride, and someone threw an empty soda bottle into the window of the car where he was sitting, and it enraged him, and he got out of the car and he started charging at pedestrians. And he did eventually get back into the car, but it created this huge hours long incident. And after that, the Heralds kept Travis inside, and he had nothing to do, and his weight ballooned. He became obese and bored and frustrated, and he just rocked back and forth all day. And one day in 2009, Sandra Harold was having a really difficult time with him, and she called her friend Charla Nash to come over and help her with Travis. And when Charla showed up, Travis ran out the front door of the house and attacked her, and he ripped her face and her hands off, and she miraculously survived. But police shot and killed Travis.
That's an extreme version of what happens, but that's pretty much where it goes when you have a chimp in your basement or in a cage in your house. And I had never heard the story of Buck until the show. And it's a similar story that the injuries weren't as bad, but kind of same thing. And then the police came and shot him.
Right. And it's a more recent story. And in both of those situations, law enforcement authorities knew. They were well aware of the danger that these animals presented and were capable of. And in Buck's situation, he was held as a pet in Pendleton, Oregon, and his death occurred just a couple of years ago. But in both cases, people within law enforcement tried to raise the alarm, to say, in Buck's case, after the Travis incident happened, a veterinarian within the Oregon Department of Agriculture, said, what are we doing here? Should we be allowing this? Because the woman who owned Buck had a permit from that agency. And they did. They kept approving the permit, even though when PETA looked into it, we found obvious violations of the permit, including that despite the fact that she was required to keep Buck contained, he was not only being allowed to roam inside the house freely, she was letting him outside to roam on her property.
Wow.
And so I think, one of the really important aspects of this that Chimp Crazy doesn't touch on as much is the role that our law enforcement and regulatory authorities play in allowing these situations to occur in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the case of Buck, it was her daughter that was attacked and bitten and really mauled. But again, not his fault. I mean, you're putting these animals in like ridiculously horrible conditions. They're more like prisoners. I mean, everyone says throughout the film, and they are when they're little, oh, it's my baby. I love him more than my child. Oh, it's the kid I always wanted. But as soon as they get big enough, they're not the baby anymore. They're like big, dangerous animals that they keep behind bars for the most part because they're so dangerous. And yet this is all somehow okay. And there's a weird psychology going on for sure with people that that want to keep wild animals. I would say across the board, not just chimps, right? If you want to keep a tiger or a lion, it's pretty strange too, because it's always done in the name of love, but it's really cruel. And there's no recognition of the cruelty. And there's some weird disconnect in this whole thing that you do feel really for Tanya Haddock's, like you feel bad for her. Like, she really, I mean, as much as it's all, the whole thing's horrible. But you feel bad for her because she really believes her own narrative that this is all out of love. And it's so insanely like mean to do to this poor animal.
I think it's important to remember too, though, that just like Joe Exotic, Tanya Haddox is a master manipulator. And we see it in the series. Lying comes so easily to her. And so I think we also have to question whether any of this that she's saying to us is true. And when you look objectively, okay, so she says she loves Tonka. But when you look objectively at the facts, what did she do? She took him away from his family, his chimpanzee family. He was supposed to go with his chimpanzee family to the sanctuary in Florida. She took him away from that, despite claiming that he was so ill he couldn't be transported to the facility in Florida. But she transported him to this facility in Ohio where he was stashed for a number of months before she built the cage in her basement. And then she brought him back and kept him all alone in this cage in her basement, like a prisoner of a serial killer. And even though she claimed that he had congestive heart failure, she continuously fed him candy and McDonald's and Powerade. I mean, it just doesn't add up to me. And then, as we saw that toward the end of the series, she was prepared to kill him.
No, you know what? You're completely right. I was duped because I did feel kind of bad for her. And kind of all these,
that's really common.
These women that, like, it just seems like it's some like almost a disease. But you're right, that it's always situations where, or most of these situations, someone's making money somehow off of this. And I'm assuming the YouTube woman is making money off of the chimp she has that you were just talking about.
We don't know how much money she's making, but she has a lot of followers. Yeah. It's a monetized YouTube account. She sells merch.
Right.
As far as we can tell, this is her job. And just like Tanya Haddox's job is selling baby animals to anyone in the country who will pay for them. If you really loved an animal like that, you wouldn't take a baby primate away from their mother at just a few days old when you know that they need their mother for years, and in the wild they stay with their mother for years. Instead, they create this horrific trauma for both the mothers and the infants.
Yeah.
All for money. And I think also a big part of this for people who own exotic animals is ego. And I think, for the men who own tigers and the women who own chimpanzees and primates, it's a different part of the ego that's being fed, but it's ego just the same.
The monkeys she has at the end, all the little babies, and she's doing that weird petting zoo, like, that's all legal, right?
I mean, again, arguably it violates the Federal Animal Welfare Act, which is enforced by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, to take a baby animal away from their mother without medical necessity. And that's something that PETA is working on pushing that agency to enforce. But yes, we don't know how many primates are currently living in private homes because there's a patchwork of laws across the country regulating it. But the estimate is that there are around 15,000 primates in private homes alone. And that doesn't include the thousands and thousands more in roadside zoos that are all coming out of this industry and enriching people like Tanya Haddox. And so that's why it's so important for people to never, ever buy a ticket to a roadside zoo to support this industry. And we also want people to be really careful about which accounts you're following on social media, because roadside zoos are a dying industry. But what we're seeing much more of is this concept of an exotic animal influencer. where people exploit monkeys and other wild animals on Instagram and TikTok videos, and you can make even more money doing that.
I know PETA shut down quite a few roadside zoos, and you've shut down quite a few roadside zoos, but what does it take to actually shut them down?
Unfortunately, it's really difficult because we're not only, as I've said, we're not only fighting against the roadside zoos themselves, we're also having to fight the agencies that are supposed to be regulating these industries to try to get them to do their jobs in the first place. And then when they don't, which is usually the case, we step in. And so if there are endangered species, then we could file an Endangered Species Act lawsuit. We've sometimes filed public nuisance lawsuits alleging that the manner in which these facilities are holding animals in cruel conditions creates a public nuisance. That's a much more novel legal theory. And so those are some of the ways that we've been able to shut down roadside zoos. And occasionally, if we're able to put enough pressure on an agency, and after Tiger King, it was really helpful for us to be able to get such massive publicity whenever we submitted a complaint against the villains from that series. And in that case, we saw federal authorities actually step in and shut down some of these places with evidence that we provided them. But it shouldn't take arguably the most successful docuseries of all time for the government to do its job. So it's really difficult, but we have a great record of shutting down some of the worst roadside zoos in the country, and we're going to keep working at this until this industry is completely dead and gone for good.
So with Tiger King, though, I mean, not only did a lot of places get shut down, a lot of those guys are now in jail, right?
So Joe Exotic is in jail. Doc Antle is awaiting sentencing on federal crimes, conspiracy to commit money laundering and conspiracy to traffic in endangered animals. So he may be joining Joe in prison. We will see. Jeff Lowe and Tim Stark, two of the other villains in the series, are both out of business. And Mario Tabrawi, the fellow who was apparently the basis of Scarface, he does still have an active roadside zoo in Miami called the Zoological Wildlife Foundation that holds a juvenile chimpanzee named Limbani in solitary confinement, and they exploit him daily on social media. So that's another facility that we're hoping that Chimp Crazy will help us shed some light on, and hopefully give us the momentum that we need to get Limbani and all of the other animals who are suffering at Zoological Wildlife Foundation out of there.
Was the Tiger King, was that one of the reasons the Big Cat Safety Act finally passed after all these years?
100%. 100%. The momentum from Tiger King resulted in the Big Cat Public Safety Act being passed.
And what did that mean? What does the Big Cat Public Safety Act mean in terms of what happened once that was passed?
So the Big Cat Public Safety Act prohibited public contact between members of the public and big cats. So the whole tiger cub petting industry that made Joe and Doc and all these other horrible people so much money was prohibited across the United States with the stroke of a pen. It also prohibited the private ownership of big cats. So your neighbor can no longer go out and buy a baby tiger and keep them in their backyard.
Which is so crazy that a few years ago,
a good thing.
That they could not that long ago. And well, I want to talk about the Primate Safety Act, but before that, I want to talk about Missouri. Why is Missouri so bad in terms of you can just kind of go buy any animal?
I wish I knew, but it is like the wild, wild west for animals. Virtually everything goes. It's also a haven for puppy mills. But it's not the only state in the United States that where these sorts of industries are flourishing. But the two primary breeders for chimpanzees were in Missouri for many, many years. There are a lot of the worst roadside zoos in the country are still there. And it may be there is this political attitude in Missouri that you should be free to own whatever or whomever you desire, which obviously um, doesn't consider the suffering that causes to those individuals, like the chimpanzees, or the public safety risks that come with allowing people to keep dangerous wild animals in their homes or on their properties.
Well, and in Missouri, also, there's still a lot of auctions, right? Where people can go and buy like a baby kangaroo or like just any animal pretty much.
Yeah, that's right. There's one of the biggest exotic animal auctions in the country is held in Missouri. Over a few days, a couple of times a year, you can go out there and you can find virtually any animal that you could possibly want. And the tracing and the paperwork in those auctions is often very questionable. So if someone buys a monkey, determining where that animal went is a really open question. And people like Tanya Haddix, these exotic animal dealers and brokers that bring animals to these auctions, often walk away from a 2 or 3 day auction with tens of thousands of dollars from selling animals.
Wow. Yeah, it's unbelievable that it's still happening in such numbers as well. And even with chimpanzees, you would think after Travis, people would just not want primates in their home, period, just because it's so horrible for the primate, but also just for anyone else too. But we don't seem to learn.
I mean, and as we saw in Chimp Crazy, even Sandra Harold, who went through that with Travis, after he died, she went out and helped another woman buy another chimpanzee, and she would go and visit him. And Tanya Haddix, even we found out in the last episode, after Tonka was confiscated from her, she went into a cage with another chimpanzee and she was attacked herself. But she still says that she would get another chimpanzee in a heartbeat. I mean, it's an addiction, an obsession, a sickness that these people seem to have, that, they don't think that it could happen to them. And even when it does, they are still in denial about it. Yeah.
And I think that the Sandra thing with the Travis owner, that of all the things throughout that entire docuseries that shocked me, the most shocking was a year after Travis destroyed her friend. She said, "Yeah, I'm ready for another chimp."
Yeah, it's wild. And, it's one of those things that you couldn't make this stuff up. Truth is stranger than fiction. It's just so bizarre, and it really shows you what we're fighting against and why these cases that we bring against exotic animal owners are 100% of the time just so crazy, because these people don't think that, one, that the law applies to them, but also it's almost as if logic doesn't apply to them.
No. So tell us about the Captive Primate Safety Act and what it is and what it would mean if it's passed.
Captive Primate Safety Act. We're really hoping that the momentum from Chimp Crazy will get this law passed, just as Tiger King got the Big Cat Public Safety Act passed. And what the Captive Primate Safety Act would do, it is a bipartisan federal law, and it would essentially prohibit the private ownership of primates, of all primates. It would make it illegal to sell primates into the pet trade, or to breed primates for the pet trade. People who currently own primates would be allowed to keep them if they register them with federal authorities. And so that way, federal authorities would know which primates are out there, which there currently isn't a mechanism for that. And also, importantly, one of the reasons that it's called the Captive Primate Safety Act is because one of the justifications for this is first responders. So, it's something that people don't often think about, but people have emergencies, whether you have an exotic animal in your home or not. But then the EMTs show up and open the door, and there could be a chimpanzee in the house. and they're not equipped to deal with that. So this registration would also help first responders to know what they can expect when they go into homes like this.
Well, I don't know if I knew at the time and forgot. I can't imagine I would have forgotten this. So I probably didn't know at the time. But when the police officer is driving up for Travis, and Travis comes up to his car, and you're kind of like, oh no, what's going to happen? What's going to happen? And Travis just takes the door and rips it off the police car. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
They're really in danger, in a lot of situations, first responders.
Yeah. I mean, and this is, I think, something people don't necessarily connect relating to chimpanzees, because again, they're cute and relatively pliable as infants, but then they grow up and they get so strong.
Yeah.
And violence is normal in chimpanzee society. That's how they work out their problems. And so when you have a chimpanzee in a private home, it's completely normal for them to behave violently. That's what you can expect.
Right.
It is going to happen. That's the case with other primate species as well. And even the small primates are still very strong. They have sharp claws. They have sharp teeth. They can easily bite your nose or your ear or your digits off and cause a lot of damage to both adults and children.
Yeah. And people just shouldn't have them in their homes. They should be in the wild.
100%.
We shouldn't have wild animals in our homes, period. And it's a very weird, I know it happens in other countries, but it's also this really weird American thing that I don't understand it, but it's time to change it for sure. Well, Brittany, thank you. Thank you for all that you do and all you've done for animals. And and this docuseries is just incredible in terms of like letting the world know what's actually happening in American homes.
Thank you. I really appreciate it.
To learn more about Brittany, to learn more about PETA, and to watch Chimp Crazy, go to our website, speciesunite.com. We will have links to everything. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Species Unite. If you have a spare moment and could do us a favor, please subscribe, rate, review on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people find the show. I would like to thank everyone at Species Unite, including Gary Knudsen, Caitlin Pierce, Amy Jones, Paul Healy, Santina Polkinlink, Ciara Dolan, and Anna Colner, who wrote and performed today's music. Thank you for listening. Have a wonderful day.